And before we get started on chapters 2 and 3, is there any questions or thoughts from last week? Anything you want to go over or review, or any reflections you had?
Oh, it was interesting that you should mention metaphors will be sprinkled throughout. So I'm looking for more of them. I think I love metaphors, and I think it's something to look for.
Okay. All right, well, we're going to look at chapters 2 and 3 today. These two chapters are composed of 7 letters that John was told to write to the 7 churches that were mentioned at the end of chapter 1. Now, these letters are all very formulaic. They follow a very specific structure. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Everybody see that?
Wow.
All right, so this is all 7 of the letters that we're going to read, as we'll see, follow this structure. They start to the angel of the church in, and then the name of the city, and then it says these are the words of, and what follows is a title for Jesus. I know. Jesus says some things that he knows about the church that are good, but mentions some things about the church that are not so good. Therefore, repent, and tells them what's going to happen if they don't change their ways. And then the letters end with those who emerge victorious will. And the last line is, if you can hear, listen to what the Spirit is saying to the churches. So these are, they all follow this exact same pattern, but as we'll see, each letter is very specific and aimed towards a specific church. Okay, any questions or thoughts about this? Okay, then we'll take a look at the first one. Write this to the angel of the church in Ephesus. These are the words of the one who holds the 7 stars in his right hand and walks among the 7 gold lampstands. I know your works, your labor, and your endurance. I also know that you don't put up with those who are evil. You have tested those who say they are apostles but are not, and you've found them to be liars. You have shown endurance and put up with a lot for my name's sake, and you haven't gotten tired. But I have this against you. You have let go of the love you had at first. So remember the high point from which you've fallen. Change your hearts and lives and do the things you did at first. If you don't, I'm coming to you. I will move your lampstand from its place if you don't change your hearts and lives. But you have this in your favor. You hate what the Nicolaitans are doing, which I also hate. If you can hear, listen to what the Spirit is saying to the churches. I will allow those who emerge victorious to eat from the tree of life, which is in God's paradise. So what strikes you about this first letter, if anything?
He talks about their patience and their endurance.
Mm-hmm.
And what you can tolerate, and repent, do the things you did at first. If not, I'll come and remove your lampstand. Is that referring to your light?
Church.
Yeah, the lampstand symbolizes the church.
Oh, that symbolizes the church?
So I perhaps what he's saying there is, if you don't turn around, I'm going to take the identity as church away from you and give it to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
That you may have been very strong, but you have let go of the love you had.
Mm.
And this is what you have to work on, or else, you're not going to eat from the tree of life. which is everlasting life, I suppose, eternal life. They've become so discouraged, their hearts are becoming hardened. And he wants to remind them that they need to soften their hearts and open their hearts to the love of Jesus. They've forgotten that.
Yeah, and isn't that something that we could relate to? Sometimes we begin something, really gung-ho and passionate about it, but over time, that passion can kind of fade away. That can happen with careers, that can happen with, with our faith, with all kinds of things. So how does Jesus identify himself in this letter? Remember, that's going to be at the very beginning of each of these letters.
As the one who holds the 7 stars in his right hand and walks among the 7 gold lampstands. Right.
And if you remember at the end of chapter 1, it's explained that the 7 stars are the angels of the churches, which is like the messengers to each church. And the 7 lampstands are the churches themselves. So Jesus identifies himself as the one who holds the angels in his hand and walks among the churches. What have we changed our congregation's name to? Prince of Peace Evangelical Lutheran Lampstand.
That would make people talk.
What are the Nicolaitan?
I was guessing someone would ask that. We don't know. They are mentioned here, and we're going to see them get mentioned in one of the other letters. We'll see today, but we don't know anything about them beyond this. So the best guess is that they're a group of Christians, a sect of Christians who are teaching something heretical, who are doing something wrong, and it's anybody's guess what that is. I wish we knew, because then we could know whether we do it or not. Okay, so it sounds like Ephesus is a church where they started off really strong, and they're still doing okay, but they've lost some of the passion, and Jesus, calls them to get that passion back. Is this a letter that might be appropriate to send to our congregation sometimes?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yes, I think people sometimes have situations in their lives where they are becoming farther away from God because they're so discouraged. They need to be reminded that God is with them and that Jesus is there to help them and love them primarily, so that they can feel loved, and that love is contagious, because people sometimes I visited people who get very upset with some suffering that they've been through, and then they move away from God rather than toward God. And I've done it myself.
In my experience as a pastor, it seems to me that most people, when dealing with some kind of great suffering, either move away from God or move closer to God. I've also found that I'm no good at predicting who's going to do which, but that I think both of them happen a lot.
I think sometimes when you move away from God is when you're not at those extremes. Like when things are going really good, you're celebrating and thanking God that things are going well, and when things are really bad, you're praying to God, asking for strength and help. And I feel like it's in the middle that that I personally don't reach out to God as much or thank God as much, because you're just kind of going along and nothing's really fabulous, but nothing's really terrible. And I get it that when this was written, Christians were being like persecuted and stuff, so they were probably having more terrible things happening. But personally, I feel like when I don't think about God as much is when you're just sort of in the middle, like not at the extremes.
Sure. Yeah. Right now, you mentioned that your faith grows at the extremes, and I remember it was 20 years ago next week. The highest attendance in pretty much any church in this country was Sunday, September 17th, 2001. Or 16th rather, Sunday, September 16th, the first Sunday after September 11th. Attendance, and I'm sure it was true of Prince of Peace, was through the roof in every congregation in this country. It dropped off a little bit the following week and dropped off significantly after that. Went back to normal, but people went to church right after that. Okay. Anything else about the letter to Ephesus? Okay. Moving on. Write this to the angel of the church in Smyrna. These are the words of the one who is the first and the last, who died and came back to life. I know your hardship and poverty, though you are actually rich. I also know the hurtful things that have been spoken about you by those who say they are Jews, though they are not, but are really Satan's synagogue. Don't be afraid of what you're going to suffer. Look, the devil is going to throw some of you into prison in order to test you. You will suffer hardship for 10 days. Be faithful even to the point of death, and I will give you the crown of life. If you can hear, listen to what the Spirit is saying to the churches. Those who emerge victorious won't be hurt by the second death. So how does Jesus identify himself here?
The one who was first and last, who died and came back to life.
Yeah. And how would you sum up this letter? What's the message here to Smyrna?
You're going to suffer hardships,
Yep.
but don't be afraid of what you're going to suffer.
Yeah, it starts by saying, I know your hardship already. I know how your reputation is suffering, and I also know that there's even worse things coming.
What does he mean by Satan's synagogue? Though they are not, they are really Satan's synagogue.
I think that's a way of saying that people are saying horrible things about you, and they're saying, well, we're right because we're children of Israel, we're Jews, we know what the right is, and you're wrong. And I think what's being said here is that no, they're actually wrong. In this case, they're kind of speaking on behalf of Satan, not behalf of themselves. It reminds me of the gospel reading for this coming Sunday when Jesus says that he's about to suffer greatly, and Peter pulls him aside and says, and rebukes him, says, don't talk like that. And Jesus says, get behind me, Satan. He refers to Peter as Satan. And I don't think he's saying that, Satan has possessed you, Peter. I think he's saying, the things you're saying right now are not godly things. They're evil things. That's the way I interpret this, that it's it's not saying that there's a Satanist cult here so much as, they don't realize they're not following the right way at all.
So you sort of side on the talking, saying they are still Jews and they're not Christians. Some of them, the people that he's talking to, are not clear that they're Christians. About you.
Well, I think what's happening here is that the synagogue in Smyrna, because at this point the church and the synagogue had kind of separated, and Christians were not seeing themselves as a part of the synagogue anymore. I think the synagogue at Smyrna was slandering the church and saying, these horrible things about it. And here, Jesus is saying they're not speaking on behalf of God. They're speaking on behalf of Satan. They don't know what they're talking about. What do you make of the last line here? Those who emerge victorious won't be hurt by the second death. What do you think that might mean?
Second death.
When Christ resurrects all of us.
Okay.
He's giving them hope that even though they're going to suffer, hang in there, because there's hope. And as Kathy said, you will live, whether it's in this world or in the next.
Yeah, he says in verse 10, be faithful even to the point of death. And it's very hard to do that unless you have a great hope in some form or another. And one form that hope could take is that this death isn't the end. This death is just the first death, and it's okay to be faithful this way.
When does a second death occur?
Well, I think I don't think that's really what he's talking about here. I think it's easy to get caught up in questions like that. And I think what Jesus is saying here is, don't worry, there won't be a second death for you. Because it is the idea of a second death is not something that appears elsewhere in the Bible. It's not something that's made clear. So I think we can see that as a way of saying that the resurrected life is a life that won't have death along with it. Maybe it'd be more clear if my interpretation is correct, if it said those who emerge victorious won't be hurt by any second death, might be a better way to say that, or a better way to translate it.
Yeah, it sounds like the people from this church are definitely suffering more, and the first church was more just lack of enthusiasm or lack of stick-to-itiveness, but it sounds like this church is really having a lot more physical suffering than the first church.
I get the sense that you could send the first letter to a lot of churches in suburbia today, and the second letter you could send to a lot of inner city churches today. I really don't know enough about the cities in Asia Minor to know if there's if that matches Smyrna and Ephesus, but I feel like in today's world that's kind of the way these letters might fall.
And in Smyrna, in the Bible I have, it said Smyrna was a prosperous community.
Oh, okay. Well, then that doesn't fit that then. Okay.
There could be more, what should I say? More evil things going on there.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there's a metaphor perhaps, because he's saying you are actually rich, but he's saying your hardship and poverty.
Yeah.
The poverty of the spirit, perhaps, because they have the means, as Janet was pointing out, they're pretty well to do, maybe, these people in Smyrna.
That's interesting. That's kind of the opposite of the way I was thinking about it, but that might be right. I was thinking that he was saying, I know that you are physically suffering, that you're impoverished, but remember that you are rich in faith. But maybe it's the exact opposite, saying that I know that you're impoverished in your faith, despite that you're rich in things. I think you could see it either way. That's interesting.
Maybe they're resting on their laurels, thinking everything, they're set, they've got enough money, but he's reminding them that that's not the point of life, that, you have to be rich in the spirit. I think maybe that's another translate. That's another thought I had anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interpreting Revelation is like interpreting a poem or a work of art, because it is a work of art, and it's there's multiple ways to see things, and it doesn't mean that one of them is necessarily right and one is wrong.
What's interesting, when we start looking at maybe those St. John's Bible's illustration illuminations, the artists will show their interpretation of some of the things, the way they see it and feel it, and that will be very interesting to see.
And I did look through that and get some images from it. None of them really were from the chapters we're looking at today, but I think starting next week I'll be sharing some of those on the screen too.
So this line that says, what is it? Let anyone who has an ear listen to what the Spirit is saying to the churches.
Mm-hmm.
That just keeps repeating in every message, and you may have had that on the first slide, but since you're trying to look through all that, it's the same, almost word for word, the same.
Yep.
The same thing, but then he tags something else on after that, except for in a future one it doesn't. It's the last thing. So it's almost like it's a recurring theme, or I feel like in a way it's like he had a Microsoft Word file and he changed the stuff that was pertinent to that, but he kept like that same line in every letter.
Yeah.
So yeah.
He has a template and he puts it in.
Yeah, he has a template. Yeah.
Like my child had when he was saying thank you notes to his grandparents. He had it all in there, and he's, can't you just change that so we'll see that you mean this?
And I think that's interesting, because what it tells us is that the message that God has for us is in some ways individualized, but in other ways is the same message for us all. That there are some things that are common and constant, and there are other things that are appropriate to our individual or communal situations.
Actually, your translation here says, if you can hear. My translation says, let anyone who has an ear. It's probably not that much different, but kind of interesting. The translate in the translation. One is just saying, if you can hear. And the other one says, let anyone who has an ear. So, yeah. Obviously, there's a difference between hearing and listening. We all know that. But.
Yeah, and I think that shows that these letters were intended to be, to be public. We're not eavesdropping on a private letter here. This was always intended to be for the whole church, even though it's framed as a particular situation. I had this silly idea that we were going to get through all 7 letters today, but we're not. That's okay. That's okay.
I remember seeing, I thought there was a psalm that repeats this idea of listening. Listen to me with your heart so I can, when I speak to you. I read it somewhere about, let me hear what, it's a psalmist, I think. Let me hear what you're saying when I come to you with my heart. So it's like listening has to do with the ear of the heart, the ear being the heart, with the heart. Like, you're not just listening or hearing, you're listening with the heart. So right. I was thinking, just read that in the Psalm somewhere. So it's a repeat, I think, over the Bible, to listen. Yeah. Through the Bible.
Yeah, thank you for that. Anything else about the letter to Smyrna? Okay, then let's go to Pergamum. Write this to the angel of the church in Pergamum. These are the words of the one who has the sharp two-edged sword. I know that you are living right where Satan's throne is. You are holding on to my name, and you didn't break faith with me, even at the time that Antipas, my faithful witness, was killed among you, where Satan lives. But I have a few things against you, because you have some there who follow Balaam's teaching. Balaam had taught Balak to trip up the Israelites so they would eat food sacrificed to idols and commit sexual immorality. In the same way, you have some who follow the Nicolaitans' teaching. So change your hearts and lives. If you don't, I'm coming to you soon, and I will make war on them with the sword that comes from my mouth. If you can hear, listen to what the Spirit is saying to the churches. I will give those who emerge victorious some of the hidden manna to eat. I will also give to each of them a white stone with a new name written on it, which no one knows except the one who receives it. So how does Jesus identify himself here?
The one who has the sharp two-edged sword tongue.
Yeah. Yeah, we saw that last week, how the Son of Man, or the human one, was described as having this two-edged sword that came from his mouth. So here he's telling Pergamum, that's who I am. I'm the one with the mouth that can cut. And what do you see in this one? This, I think, is a little more complicated and maybe harder to understand than the others. What are your thoughts on this letter?
The line that said, I know you're living right where Satan's throne is. You are holding on to my name. Yeah. And in the Lutheran Study Bible, it says that Pergamum was surrounded by culture, but they were influenced by Rome.
Mm.
And they start to yield to corruption, even though they're holding on to their name.
And that might be what that means here is it may be a way of saying, like, I know that it is not easy to be faithful in Pergamum right now because of the way the town is. That might be what Satan's throne represents here.
I notice he starts off with this one of the previous verses, giving praise,
Mhm.
Giving some, that you're doing some things right, but
They're holding on to my name.
you can get better.
They want to be a Christian, but they're breaking faith.
Mhm.
The reference to Balaam and Balak is from a story in the book of Numbers. It's a time when a false prophet named Balaam led a lot of the Israelites astray, and they suffered for that. I think what's happening here is I believe he's comparing what the Nicolaitans are doing to what Balaam did. Not necessarily that they're doing what Balaam taught the Israelites to do, centuries earlier, but that it's the same sort of thing. Just as a false prophet led people astray then, these Nicolaitans are leading you astray now. And again, we don't know, how. And I will be honest with you, I have no idea what the hidden manna is, and I have no idea what this white stone is all about. Those might be references that people would have understood then, or they might have been cryptic even then. Anything I've read has not helped me to figure out what that means. Except in so much as, those who emerge victorious will have food to eat. Why it's hidden, I don't know, but we'll have food to eat, and we'll have a new name, which, we could think of the name that we receive in our baptism, the name Child of God, but this is confusing. Any other thoughts or questions here?
Says, I'm coming to you soon. Now he was crucified. They know this, and that he left. And he's supposed to come back someday. That's how the Jews are looking for the Messiah. So.
And the church was looking for the return of Jesus.
Right.
And I think this is a theme that goes throughout the book of Revelation, is that I am coming soon. I am coming soon. I am coming soon. And then, it never really describes exactly when, unless you want to try to interpret the strange, sights and sounds that we'll see. But it says, I'm coming soon. And I think the image of making war on them with the sword that comes from my mouth is a reminder that it is through through word that that God tends to operate. You know, God created the world, according to Genesis chapter 1, through nothing but words. You know, God said, "Let there be light," and it was. Jesus is described as the very word of God, who becomes flesh. And the promise here is that when I come and make war and defeat my enemies, it will not be with with weapons and with
Violent.
armies and violence. It will be through my word. That's all I need. My word will defeat them.
Words matter.
Mhm.
I was thinking he could be, as the great, Martin Luther King, as we were mentioning before. He didn't mince words. He was direct and assertive, firm, trying to get his point across, loving and in the same way able to speak with love, which is interesting to me, that someone can be so strong in their convictions and be so loving at the same time.
Anything else? Okay, we'll move on to the next one. Sorry about the size of this font here. It's a relatively long one. Write this to the angel of the church in Thyatira. These are the words of God's Son, whose eyes are like a fiery flame and whose feet are like fine brass. I know your works, your love and faithfulness, your service and endurance. I also know that the works you have done most recently are even greater than those you did at first. But I have this against you. You put up with that woman, Jezebel, who calls herself a prophet. You allow her to teach and to mislead my servants into committing sexual immorality and eating food sacrificed to idols. I gave her time to change her heart and life, but she refuses to change her life of prostitution. Look, I'm throwing her into a sickbed. I'm casting those who have committed adultery with her into terrible hardship. If they don't change their hearts from following her practices, and I will even put her children to death with disease. Then all the churches will know that I'm the one who examines minds and hearts, and that I will give to each of you what your actions deserve. As for the rest of you in Thyatira, those of you who don't follow this teaching and haven't learned the so-called deep secrets of Satan, I won't burden you with anything else. Just hold on to what you have until I come. To those who emerge victorious, keeping my practices until the end, I will give authority over the nations, to rule the nations with an iron rod and smash them like pottery, just as I received authority from my Father. I will also give them the morning star. If you could hear, listen to what the Spirit is saying to the churches. So how does Jesus identify himself in this one?
Angry and strong, fiery flame and feet like fine brass. He's showing his ability to take things into his hands and, take care of problems. And once he's going to give others the authority to be strong and not put up with anything that is bad, like smashing smashing like them people like pottery nations, like the iron rod.
It also says that it's the Son of God too. Like
Mhm.
the first two letters don't say that.
Yep.
So yeah.
And perhaps that's used here as a way of claiming that authority. That this seems to, a lot of this letter seems to be about authority. Is who has the authority over your church? And Jesus claims it is I. It is I who, you know, who has the fiery eyes and the brass feet. I have all authority. Now, the name Jezebel is certainly a symbolic name. You know, it's unclear whether there was a real woman in Thyatira whose real name was Jezebel, or if this name here is a reference to the book of First Kings, where Jezebel is the wife of King Ahab, and she leads the Israelites very far away from God. She basically is single-handedly you know, seen as really drawing the nation away from who they're supposed to be. So, you know, this again, just like the last letter referred to Balaam, this is a connection with a story in the Old Testament saying that, you know, what happened to Israel is happening to you, young church. And what do you think of the gift that will be received according to this letter? That what I will give you is authority over the nations, to rule them with an iron rod and smash them like pottery. I think there have been times in the life of the church where things like this have been interpreted literally, that you know, God gives us the authority to rule over all the nations of Europe and to go and attack the nation of Palestine, and to, you know, I'm thinking of the Crusades and other things in the Middle Ages when the church was really quite brutal. When the you know, the Inquisition happened and people who didn't do what the church wanted were brutally killed. Do you think that's what is meant here? Is that what the authority is the church is to have? Because I don't think so. I think the church was wrong in instances like that.
I don't know. He was a contrast right there. That after that sentence, he says, "I will give you the morning star."
Yeah.
You know, it's like darkness and light. Or almost like a violence and peace. I mean, it's like a contrast there. Peace.
Maybe because I have a problem with feeling like the church can just use violence to get what the church wants, but maybe if you give someone power, it's more like it's more true character that you have the power but you don't actually use it. That you knowing that you have the power gives you authority, but then I don't know. Maybe I'm just making wishful thinking. I'm wishing that this is what this means, but yeah. because I don't I don't know. I don't believe that people who are Christian or the Christian church should use violence just to get what they want. Like a clear example of that is people that want to protest abortion clinics, but yet kill the doctors or the nurses or bomb the clinic. That just doesn't make any sense to me. Like, if you're against killing, you're against killing. I don't understand how people feel like they could do violence against an abortion clinic because they're against abortion. So I feel like if you're given authority to rule, you should use that power to help people, even if you could smash them like pottery. I don't know.
Maybe it's not as literal as it looks, and it's just, as you said, Kim, it's the power you have, the feeling that you have the power to spread the light and to be very clear about it, feel confident with your power, as if you had a rock to smash and an iron rod. It's like you have that courage, confidence. I don't know if I'd look at it literally.
And I think it's also helpful to think about, how Jesus used this authority. How did, Jesus certainly could have smashed anything he wanted to with like pottery. The devil tempted him to just jump off the top of the temple, or to turn stones into bread. And he would not do that, because that's not the way Jesus uses his authority. And so if we are given authority by Jesus to be Christ's body in the world, then we are called to use our authority the way he did. And even if, I like what you said, both of you there, that if just because we have the power to do this doesn't mean that's how we're supposed to use it.
I think it also says, do not compromise your values. And to the one who conquers the desire to compromise your values, I will give the morning star. You have the power, but you don't use it.
You use it, perhaps you use it knowing you keep your heart in the right place. In other words, following the Holy Spirit, you're not going to be using your power negatively or in an unchristian way. But look at what Jesus did. He punished, he threw Jezebel into a sick bed and was going to put her children to death and disease. Now that's pretty harsh. Now, was that Jesus or God? That was God who did that.
Well, I think Jesus shows us, who God is. So I'm not sure that it really matters. That's a good question.
Because I like to think that God creates a world in which we live and things happen, and we don't if you do something bad, then you're going to be punished for it by God. I guess you are. That's a whole other, we spend hours on that one, couldn't we?
Well, one thing it reminds me of is, there's another theme that comes up multiple times in scripture, that that leaders in the church and leaders of the faith are expected to be good role models and are held to account for not doing so. You know, if you look at the Gospels, Jesus pretty much reserves all of his anger and his contempt for the religious leaders. You know, Jesus doesn't trash the Samaritans, and he doesn't pick on sick people. He doesn't even really trash the Romans much, but the religious leaders, he, you know, verbally attacks them over and over again because they're leading the people the wrong way. You know, and I think we see over and over in Scripture that you know, leaders within the people of Israel, as well as leaders in the church, are going to be held to account if you lead the people the wrong way. And here, you know, it says in verse 21, I gave her time to change her heart and life, but she refuses to do so. And I, you know, I will not stand for that. So I hear this as a call, you know, partially to, you know, if you're going to lead the people of God away from God, I'm going to do something about it. Anything else here? All right. Well, it looks like we got through chapter 2. So we got through the first 4 letters. There are 3 letters remaining in chapter 3 that we'll look at next time. But I think you know, the last question I'd have for today is, what are your thoughts on all these letters so far? You know, what do they what do you think the message is for those of us who are not in those churches at that time? What do you hear overall so far?
Keep up the faith, and your faith will carry you through.
Okay.
I am coming soon.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That we should listen to the Spirit, that the Spirit will guide us if we listen and hear what the Spirit is saying.
Okay. All right. Any last thoughts, questions, reflections before we go?
I guess it's interesting that we spend so much time thinking of God as the Trinity or the triune God, that now these 7 letters are basically taking different aspects of God and dividing it into like 7 things instead of the normal three parts that you're used to. So like the first one is talking about almost like sort of like wisdom with 7 stars and light, like wisdom and light. And the second one is talking about like how he died, how Jesus died and came back to life and conquering death. And the third one is talking about the word, and the fourth one is more like power. So it's like taking these different aspects of God and highlighting those to the different churches. So it's kind of an interesting concept to think of God as having like 7 parts when we're used to thinking of God as having 3 parts. I don't know. So it's a different way of thinking.
Yes.
Where do you get the 7 parts? Are you talking about the 7 churches?
Yeah, because the writer is kind of presenting Jesus in a different aspect of Jesus for each of the churches. I mean, I haven't read the 3rd chapter, but if you just look at the first 4, I'm assuming that the next 3 are going to highlight 3 other aspects. But I didn't read ahead, and I've never really read Revelations, but the first 4 highlight kind of 4 different aspects of Jesus being God. So I'm assuming the other 3 letters are going to do the same, but focus on different aspects. And I have a question, Pastor. This might be totally off topic. There's a song, and I don't know if you're familiar with it. I went down to the river to pray, and it talks about the star and crown. Does that come from this, about the stars and the crowns, or is there some other part in the Bible where it talks about who will wear the golden the star and crown? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that comes from Revelation. I think we'll see stars and crowns are going to show up a number of different places, and so I'm not sure exactly what chapter that image is from, but it's probably from this book, because we're gonna meet a lamb who wears a crown and has a star in his hand, kind of thing. Right. So yeah. A lot of musicians and composers have written things to Revelation, because it's just certain parts of it are just such gorgeous imagery and powerful imagery. So.
Well, I was so excited because last Sunday, the second reading was from Ephesians, and it was talking about the armor of God. But I had just learned a song this past summer called "When a Knight," like a fighting knight, when a knight won his spurs, and it's about how there's no more knights and dragons, but with faith as our shield, we still conquer like the ogres of greed, and I'm like, that's where these words come from, and and it's actually, I think, like an English hymn or something, but it didn't seem to go with like our church until this reading, and I was like, that's it, those are the words. So I was so excited. Yeah.
Yeah, the Irish, the Celtic, was it St. Patrick's prayer or something? It was about the armor, and the imagery of the armor is quite, the breastplate is quite strong. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Well, this has been a great discussion. Thank you, Pastor.
Yeah, thank you. All right, then we'll see you all next time. Have a wonderful day.
Okay.
Okay.
See you.
Bye, everybody.
See you Sunday. Bye.